My name is Matt.
My name's Ephie.
I am 39 years old.
22 years old.
My childhood was pretty decent. I come from a loving family. I was really close with my family. My family is awesome. It's big, very loving, but my family's very religious. So that definitely has been a tough spot for me since I don't really follow my religion like I should, I guess.
My childhood, I was adopted, from birth. My dad was in the Navy, and then he was telecommunications, and he owned a business. And my mom was a stay-at-home mom. My family is really small. They're very Asian. I don't talk to my dad's side of the family anymore. My mom is pretty put together. She's very nice.
3 words to describe me: intense, difficult, and I'd probably say loyal.
3 words to describe me: probably sarcastic, creative, kind of like a hot mess, but it's like a hot mess, so it's fine. That's 2 words, they're hyphenated.
I work at Safeway at the moment.
I'm a barista. Before that, I was an assistant teacher, which I liked more.
I want to start my own fitness training business for law enforcement, firefighters, EMTs, first responders, and security personnel.
In the future, I want to hopefully do this podcast, maybe own a few businesses, and then eventually I'll go back to teaching.
I was probably, I want to say, 35 when I found out I had PTSD.
I was 17 when I was diagnosed with PTSD. Hello, Internet. I'm Ephie, and this is The Human Condition. I'm going to put a little trigger warning on this one. This episode contains triggering material, including talk about domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, terrorism, combat, and probably more. The things that cause PTSD are heavy and uncomfortable, and if this is something that resonates with you, I'm sorry, and maybe step away from this episode. I'm glad that I have your support, but protect your mental health first. When I first met Matt, I realized we had very little in common. He's 39, I'm 22. He's a military veteran that has seen the world, and I have been to Canada, Mexico once, before we were travel banned from a ton of places down there, and maybe 8 states. He's African American, I'm Asian American. The only things we really seem to have in common is that we're both nice, although debatable on my end, honestly, and that we both suffer from PTSD. PTSD, if you don't know, stands for post-traumatic stress disorder. Post-traumatic stress disorder is a long-lasting trauma disorder that can occur in people after they experience a traumatic event. I know, creative naming, right? PTSD is a debilitating mental illness that can cause flashbacks, nightmares, anxiety, depression, a constant state of fight or flight, emotional detachment, hopelessness, and amnesia, not remembering events of trauma or when trauma is negatively affecting emotional state. PTSD is a fairly new disorder, so scientifically speaking, we don't know too much about why it happens, but psychologists believe it's a mix between fight or flight, survival, and changes to the hippocampus. The brain may keep traumatic events at the forefront of the mind to help you survive another traumatic experience, if one should arise. For example, your brain figures hyperarousal, or the feeling of always being on edge, could help if another unsafe situation happens. Studies have also shown that people with PTSD are always releasing the same stress hormones as it does when in immediate danger. People that have PTSD are in constant fight or flight. Lastly, psychologists have seen a huge correlation in the shrinking of the hippocampus in people with PTSD. The hippocampus is the part of the brain that regulates memory and emotion. A malfunctioning hippocampus could lead to depression, anxiety, flashbacks, and the amnesia that inevitably comes with PTSD. One time in therapy, I had it explained to me that trauma isn't processed the same way as other memories. All of these things combined means that traumatic memories are always at the forefront of your mind. When you have PTSD, your brain is literally stuck in the past, which is why it can be so hard to break that cycle. Matt has PTSD from combat. I have PTSD from abuse. Our PTSD is not the same. Our triggers are not the same. We don't have nightmares about the same demons at night. but at the end of the day, we both have to battle the same devil.
It's so much harder to get this stuff out because I know there's going to be a ton of people listening. So like it's so much easier when I'm talking to a therapist because I can just let it flow out. But I think that's what's hindering me is because I'm like, oh my God, there's going to be people listening.
Well, I'm flattered that you think people are going to be listening to this podcast.
Well, I don't know, but I hope someone listens. I hope it can help someone.
I started out this interview with one question. Tell me the story of your PTSD. Which, yeah, very specific on my end. Sorry, Matt. No wonder he couldn't figure out what to say. So instead, I switched over to a better question. What traumatizing thing happened that gave you this lovely mental illness called PTSD?
9/11 is definitely what brought it on. Obviously, I didn't know that PTSD was a thing. I was a kid then. We had just got done partying. We were on the tail end of one of the deployments that I went on in 2001. We were looking forward to going home. It was going to be amazing. And then we found out that our country got attacked. So for me, that wasn't what I joined the military for. I didn't join the military to fight anyone. I just joined the military to party, have fun, have my college paid for. It was going to be amazing. And with that one single act, my entire life changed, as well as the lives of everybody I knew at that point, because they shut down all our communication. And I think lack of communication breeds fear. And it's kind of like we were eating each other because we didn't know what was going on. All we knew is that when we'd fly our planes off with all this armament, with these bombs and rockets and missiles, they'd come back empty. So obviously we knew we were killing people. And I knew that I was having a part in killing all these people. So in my mind, I'm thinking women, children, what the hell's going on? I'm scared. I can't talk to my family. I don't know if they're alive. I don't know if they're dead. I don't know if the whole country's blown up because I'm out in the middle of the ocean. So we don't know what the hell's going on. And that, the lack of sleep, that all that built in together is what started it initially, but I didn't know that's what I was dealing with. So when we came home, I started to notice that I was sleeping all the time. I was always angry. I always wanted to fight people. My drinking kicked up and some drug use, which I'd done it in the past, but it wasn't as bad. It was starting to get, but I just figured that was kind of part of military life. So I didn't find out till later that that was symptoms of my PTSD. I noticed, like, if I'd go to a crowded place like a club or a bar, I couldn't stop watching people. If people looked at me for more than a couple seconds, I wanted to beat the shit out of them because I thought they were going to try to harm me. People had to watch how they carried things around me. So, like, if I was in a restaurant and a waitress or a waiter dropped a plate, I would jump. Normal things like people eating around me, like if they were just staring at me while they're holding a knife, I automatically assumed that something was about to go down. So I'd grab my knife and kind of hold it under the table and get ready to pretty much attack them if they got close to me or run. So fight or flight has been like a huge part of my every single day life. I cut a lot of people out of my life because I didn't know what was going wrong with me. I didn't know why I was always angry. I pretty much shut out my family. I shut out lots of people that cared about me because I didn't know how to tell them why I was acting the way I was acting because it wasn't how I was raised. I was raised to be polite, respectful, to be a super protector of women. I got married when I was 22 after I'd come home from my 9/11 deployment, and I'd been sweethearts with her since I was 14 and she was 10, but I hadn't seen her in years. But we kept in contact on the phone, so kind of like dating through the phone, if that makes sense. Kind of weird, but so everything was going good. Decided to get married. I flew home on leave. We got married. My dad married us because my dad's a pastor and a preacher, so he's the one who married us. And I guess one of the first things that happened that was letting people know something was wrong is when I disappeared during my wedding day. I took off and I was gone for hours. I was kind of wandering around. I was kind of agitated, I guess, through the ceremony. A lot of it was because there's people that I didn't know there, so I was a little irritated that there's so many people that were there that I didn't know. A lot of them were like friends of my family from church. One of my sisters, she's like my favorite sister, she didn't show up to my wedding because she hated my wife. And that hatred kind of stemmed for years, but I didn't know anything about it. So that kind of probably unconsciously led into why I was wandering around. I don't know for sure, but that might have been because I kept looking for her. But after we got married, our honeymoon went all right, nothing too bad. But then once I flew her back to Virginia with me to where I was stationed at, that's when things started to become evident. I'd come home from work really angry, really frustrated. So if I had a bad day at work, I'd take it out on her. She'd ask me, hey, what's going on? What's the problem? I would seclude myself in the room. I didn't want to talk to her about it because I'm like, you don't understand what I've been through. You're not military. You haven't seen what I've seen, dealt with what I dealt with. So I wouldn't talk. And she'd always cry. And then I get mad at her for crying because I don't like crying. Crying kind of it works me up. I'd be hiding in the room with a loaded gun in my hand, freaking out, thinking people are going to come get me, thinking she's going to do something to me, always thinking that there was some underlying thing that she's trying to do to me. And she really wasn't. It was my paranoia. So we were always getting into fights. I'd throw plates at the wall. I mean, I never threw a plate directly at her, but I'd throw them at the wall and they'd break and she'd freak out. But I did hit her. I was abusive, unfortunately. There were one specific time, the first time we were at a party and I was out of control. She threw like a beer or a drink in my face, set me off. I punched her in the face. I'm not proud of it. I regret that every day in my life. I regret a lot of the other times. So I carry around a lot of shame and hurt because of that, especially since my dad's the one who married us and I had to come crawling back to the family. So that's kind of a part of me that a lot of people don't know because everyone knows me as a good guy. So I guess the best way I can put it is I'm a good, amazing person and a horrible, evil person rolled up into one person. So I've done a lot of stuff to try to help myself be better. I do a lot of meditation, yoga, working out, hitting punching bags. I'd rather hit punching bags than people because I've hit a lot of people in my life and it's not a very nice thing to do. I did kind of MMA type stuff, fighting. I was punishing myself for years, so getting my ass beat because I felt like that's what I deserved since I did it to other people. Obviously, it didn't make it right, and I can never take back the bad things I've done, but I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to do better, and I promised myself that I would never allow my PTSD to be an excuse for horrible behavior like that ever again. My second marriage, obviously my two after that weren't as bad. They didn't involve any domestic violence, but more emotional because I still didn't know how to deal with myself. I kind of felt like, well, I'm not physically abusive anymore, but I wasn't truly ready to be in a committed relationship the way I wanted to be. I was always embarrassed if I didn't do something well enough. So I was always making, obviously my second and third wife, I was making them cry because I was very, how can I put it? I wouldn't I'll put them down, what people think of emotional, but I was disconnected. I never wanted to talk about anything. And I guess that is a form of abuse too, ignoring them. But I wasn't always oh, you're ugly, you're horrible. But I never wanted to talk about anything important. I was just an asshole. Her family didn't understand, what was wrong with me. So there's a lot of times where I can't account for her. There's a lot of times where people can't account for me because it's I didn't exist. Because I was homeless a lot. It's I wasn't even a person. I knew I had a problem after a while is when I started cutting everybody off. And I'd say the true fear is when I had to have special agents come to find me because my parents put out a missing persons report because they hadn't heard anything from me for like eight years. And then on top of that, I tried to reach out to a friend and it backfired. I was homeless at the time, and I ended up staying at like this homeless veterans home, and some special people came and paid me a visit. Very scary, very hurtful. But more than that, more than the fact of facing trouble, was the fact that my parents were so freaked out. Like, they didn't know if I was dead. They didn't know if I was alive. And that is probably one of the most impactful things that that specific agent told me, because it was a girl. And she's like, the way your family, they're shredded. They didn't know if you were alive. They didn't know if you were dead. They were calling the Army. They were calling the Navy, because I served in the Army and the Navy. They're like, they were begging anybody that had any information about our son, could you please get in contact with us or get in contact with him, and please let him know that we're dying to see him, just to know if he's alive. If he can call us, he doesn't have to talk, just say, hi, I'm alive. That kind of broke me down. I started going to meetings, veteran meetings, started getting counseling, started reaching out to other vets, started reaching out to just other people in general. I started going to domestic violence groups, even though I've never truly been a recipient of domestic violence, and most of the people that were in the group were recipients of it, so it's usually a bunch of women in the groups. But I just sat there, and it just really fucked me up real bad to know that I'd been a part of hurting another person that bad. Even though I've been to war and seen a bunch of fucked up shit, there's really no excuse to hurt people that way. And getting help, it's not always easy. It's a lot of work. It takes a lot of time, a lot of effort. It takes a lot of strength to ask for help. I think just admitting that you need help is probably one of the strongest things you can do, because self-denial is tough. And I lived in denial for a long time, and I'm still getting help today. I watch a lot of TED Talks and stuff about people who've overcome trauma, how they become success stories. Obviously, I don't feel I'm a success story, and I'm not where I want to be, but hopefully I can get to where I need to be. I've taken a lot of medication, therapy. I've done a lot of acupuncture, so a lot of non-traditional therapies. I've gone to do a lot of like Chinese traditional medicine. I've met with a lot of their doctors. They do a lot of cool shit like aromatherapy, acupuncture, meditations, different types of light therapy. Asking people for forgiveness, that's one of the biggest ones that has helped me. Some of them have forgiven me, a lot of them haven't. But I think more than anything, forgiving yourself is one of the hardest things to do, because it's easier to forgive another person than it is to forgive yourself. But forgiving yourself for not being perfect, for being human, is probably one of the biggest things on the path to healing for anyone who's dealing with any type of mental illness or mental health challenge, whether it's PTSD, depression, anxiety, eating disorders, pretty much anything. Having patience with yourself and having patience with other people is probably a big key to learning how to heal and get help. And if there's anyone that does listen to this, don't be afraid to ask for help. It could be from a family member, a friend. There's lots of anonymous numbers that you can call that you don't have to give your name, and it doesn't matter what kind of mental health challenge you're facing. There's a reason to get up in the morning.
So when I was diagnosed, I didn't have a choice because it was after, this is gonna sound bad. I went on like a Ritalin binger, ADHD medication. So what I did was I was like prescribed it, and then I would like save it for months and then like binge it at one time. So yeah, and then there was just like one night where I was like, like fuck it, and I took the whole bottle, and so I overdosed. And after that I was hospitalized, and that was my second hospitalization. I was 16. The first time I was hospitalized for suicide and stuff. And here they call it an M1. At that time, I was still in high school. I think I was a junior, actually, when that happened. And I've had issues for like a really long time, and no one knew why. My dad committed suicide when I was 11, so that's kind of when everything started for me. And when I was 13, I was sexually assaulted by my best friend's brother. So he was 18, I was 13. And that like really fucked me up. But I don't think I understood it for like a really long time, because like no one talked about it. Like I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know, like, I knew it felt like wrong, right, if that makes sense. But I didn't like understand the concept of like being assaulted. So I was a child, like literally. So I have like a really hard time differentiating. It was like I didn't have a personality. Like correct. I didn't have a chance to grow up or to like be a person. So I thought it was normal, like everything right. that I was experiencing. The experience for me was really weird. I do have a dissociation disorder, so it's mostly derealization, but that was like the first time I experienced it was like when I was assaulted. It was like an out-of-body experience. I knew him. It was like devastating to me because we grew up together. Right. So he like taught me how to play Guitar Hero, stuff like that. And I knew it was malicious because this is later, but like he would send me like text messages after. It was like every year, like on like close to the date or on the date, he would send me like malicious, like it was definitely intentional. There's definitely like malicious intent. My life is a mess, but after that I got into like a really bad relationship with a guy, and it was like I'm not gonna say it's not his fault, but it was like both of our faults because I was 14 and I was like binge drinking every night. And he was younger than me by I think like 6 months. And so he like couldn't handle it. And a lot of the things like growing up, I couldn't like grow up normal. It was just like a really bad toxic situation to go into like right after that happened. Because that happened before I was in the 8th grade. And then right in the 8th grade, it was when we started dating. We dated for 2 years. I never knew how to have like good relationships with people, I think. Especially romantically. And especially with men, because I tend to like pick people that are not easy to be like people that are very opposite of me or that have traits that like really set me off. My first relationship, it's weird because I dated like really long term my entire life from when I was 14. But the guy that I was dating, I know he wasn't having a good time because it was like after that, and I like didn't understand it, but I was like super depressed. I like cut myself a lot, like self-harming, and I was like doing drugs, and it was weird because a lot of people my age, I was like a predecessor to all of that before them just because like I didn't know how to deal with it any other way. So, and I was very codependent on him because it was like he was the only person that was nice to me, it seemed like. Because after my dad died, my mom and I just, like, didn't get along. We had, like, a very toxic relationship. She would do things that, like, I don't think she knew that they were, like, abusive, but, like, she took all the doors off of my room, or if like she didn't think my room was clean enough or she got mad at me, she would like throw my stuff away. A lot of yelling, and like she had a lot of expectations for me that I couldn't meet. I know like I wasn't easy to get along with, but we didn't get along, so I didn't have like anyone else. So as soon as someone was nice to me or like showed me affection, I was like, oh, like this, like I have to hold on to this person because this is everything that I have. So we had a very unhealthy relationship. Like I remember once he went to the movies and I like just couldn't handle it. I was like, I can't like be alone. And it was mostly on my end, like super like codependent and clingy, you know. After we broke up, that was when I was hospitalized the first time, because it was like, oh well, like no one likes me. Like if he doesn't like me, then like no one does or no one will. I must have been 16 when we broke up, because after that was when I had, it wasn't like a suicide attempt, but it was definitely like something going on, so I was hospitalized that time. And I think that was like, for my mom it was really hard because my dad committed suicide, so it was like everything to her was like a red flag. She did a lot of things out of fear that just came off as like angry or as like manipulative, but at that time I still didn't know. Everyone just thought it was like depression, because like the way that like my life has gone, it's hard to see how I would be well adjusted because I wasn't. So people just thought that it was like a product of everything else. And I did have a lot of symptoms that I didn't realize were symptoms, so I just lived with it. Like I was always like super jumpy, but I had anxiety before. Like I had anxiety when I was a child. I think it was genetic. I don't know what my like biological parents have or dealt with, but I do think it was like a little bit genetic. But yeah, after the overdose, actually right before the overdose, I had some things happen. It was like right after I turned 17, I think I had an epiphany where it was like, oh, like I think that like something happened that like wasn't okay. And I came out about it, and it was like not, it wasn't good. So I didn't get the response like that I needed ever from anyone. So like law enforcement was against me, which was hard because it was like I had a fear of like what would happen, like, oh, no one is like gonna fucking care about me. And then it happened, and I was like, well, what am I supposed to do now? Like this is like everything that I didn't want and everything that I feared, and like it's happening. Like here we are, it's happening now. So yeah, that was like a few weeks after that was when I started like getting really heavy into like doing drugs and stuff for a little bit. When I was diagnosed, because I went to the hospital because I had to like make sure I lived, like yeah. Put me on dialysis and whatever, like the charcoal or whatever, you know. So after that, I was on an M1 for like 8 days. It was really long. And then I was put into like an adolescent residential, which is where they diagnosed me, and I was like shook. First off, I was like so young, I didn't even know what PTSD was. Not even like combat PTSD, right. Because I like just never had the exposure because I was 17, you know? And then I like figured it out, and I was like, that's like really dramatic. Like that's too dramatic for me. And I was like, I don't have that. But over time I realized like I do get like flashbacks, I get like nightmares, stuff like that. I have like triggers, you know, like actual like triggers, things that like set me off. And I was like, okay. It's been 5 years now since I figured it out. I think things are better on some level. It really took me a long time to get my shit together, because from the time I was 16 to the time I was 20, I was put on 8 or 9 M1s, like for like suicide attempts and like suicidal ideation. So I had a hard time even after like understanding what was wrong with me, right. Like figuring it out, or like even wanting to like get to a point where I wanted to fix it. Because like right. Being depressed or like having problems is like the only thing I've known, because that's how I grew up. I was 20, I think, when it was the last time I was hospitalized, and I like, got it together, kind of. See, the reason I asked you is because I knew that we had similarities, like I knew just because you talk about things,
Right.
even though I don't, and that despite that, it was like very different, you know?
Right.
Like the way that our lives have been are very different. Our stories here are very different. The effect it has had on us is very different. Our understanding of our illness is different. Matt can openly talk about his struggles with mental illness, a journey that I've only recently started on, and mostly in vague, kind of funny Facebook posts. Oftentimes I have felt like my PTSD is more invalidated than combat PTSD, even by myself. Especially by myself, because I was 17. Why would I have PTSD? Is my PTSD the same as Matt's, who has lived through combat, through a terrorist attack? Or was I just a dramatic teenager? There are support funds, support groups, support pages for veterans of combat PTSD, but when I was 17, it wasn't like they could put me in a group called Teenage Girls Scarred from Life. I can't speak on his experience with PTSD, but seeing as he's not part of the Teenage Girls Scarred from Life Club, I know his experiences have to be different. He was older, in a different era, in a different place, as a different gender, ethnicity. He probably feels the crushing pressure of masculinity, to be a man, to take mental health with a grain of salt until you can't ignore it anymore. I will never know that pressure, I will never know that feeling, and he'll never know mine. But so many things he says I can relate to. The fear of the unknown, the fear of everyone else around you, the anxiety, the flashbacks. This episode is the first episode I ever wrote, recorded, and conceptualized even. When Matt started talking about his PTSD, I knew that his story and my story needed to be told together at the same time, because they're different stories, but we're the same on some level, in some way. And I needed that. And I knew that probably someone somewhere needs it too. So how are you doing, like, actually doing today or lately?
Today was a little rough. I'm doing better now, but I pretty much was tossing and turning last night, freaked out about this. Because it's never easy to open up to others about painful or hurtful or shameful subjects. But if it's someone you trust, it's a lot easier, because there's very few people I would ever have this conversation with and have it like be recorded.
Yeah.
So you're one of the very few, because I'm just not. I think, and it helps that I pretty much know that you may not understand every single thing, but you understand a good majority of what I'm saying, because other people, I think that if I would have told most people that we work with, they would probably never talk to me again. And that I'm kind of worried about if any of them happen to hear that. But I mean, I gotta do what I gotta do.
Right.
And hopefully I've earned enough goodwill, I guess, with most of the people that I know, because how I actually am most of the time. Hopefully they'd be like, well, he's not that way to me, and he's, hey, everyone has challenges. So I'd say I'm doing pretty good today.
Yeah, last night I actually fell asleep really early last night, which is like surprising because usually I can't sleep. Yeah, I was pretty nervous too, because like I don't talk about this to anyone. Like, not even like Elle knows most of everything that I talked about today, and he's known me since like the 4th grade. So it's like, well, this will be interesting.
Right.
Lately I've been like all right, I've had a hard time this past month just because it was like the anniversary of my dad's death, and that
Right.
usually like fucks me up a little bit. But other than that, I guess it's good. I'm
So,
excited to
have
like.
you connected with your mom lately, like because of being the anniversary?
Yeah, we did have a conversation about like everything because the way that things went down was just really like bad. Like the everything, all the situation centering around it. So we had like a bonding moment, which is
Well,
nice
that's good.
because she didn't talk about her feelings ever. What has having PTSD taught you?
Um, it's taught me to be more empathetic, also sympathetic, to the needs of others, how to care for others because I've had to take so much time to learn how to care for myself, um, how to forgive myself and forgive others, and then just how to be a friend because there's been so many times that I didn't have a friend. I had to be my own friend. And I pretty much had to be my own bodyguard. I mean, not from like getting my ass kicked or some shit, but to be my own bodyguard against my own thoughts and to protect myself from myself, if that makes sense. So it's also taught me how to protect others. So that's why I'm always stepping in to help people. That's why I'm always so helpful. I'm always complimenting people, and not just about their physical appearance or what they're wearing, but their skill sets, because I know how painful it is when people feel like they don't have anything to offer themselves or anyone else. They suck at everything, and that can destroy someone's life. So, learning how to be there for other people and to be a support, I guess that's probably one of the biggest things I've learned.
If I could take it back, I would. I probably would be the same person. Like life would have definitely been different, but like I hate the sentiment that are like, yeah, it happens for a reason.
Yeah,
Like
I don't believe that, but I do believe that it does make you stronger.
if I had the choice, I would not have been. Um yeah, I would have been fine just living my life as an affluent Asian girl, but doesn't work out that way, I guess.
Me too. Well, not living as African Asian girl, but well, you never know. I mean, that could be the cool life to have.
I think I'm definitely more creative just because I need like more outlets to like
Yes.
feel better, if that makes sense. Like creating things for me is like not an option. Like I would do it even if people weren't listening or
Yeah.
even if other people weren't involved. So, I think there's that for me. I think maybe I have like a little bit less self-loathing and like a little bit more self-respect because it's like, oh, well, like I've already done something hard and that then like I'm here now.
Yes.
And like it might not have been easy, but at least I'm here. At least I know like anything else that like comes my
Yeah.
way. It's like whatever. Like bring it on.
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way too. I mean, it's a lot of times like I'll do things to make myself feel better, and if it helps anyone else in the process, then that's great. If not, at least I know I did something that sounded kick ass to me.
Are things better than they were?
Yes and no. Honestly, a lot of times I have to take it day by day. And generally, yes, it's better because I have a good job. I have a lot of kick ass friends. But no, because my physical living situation is worse. I'm not where I thought I was going to be in 5 years. So, yeah, it's not better in that regard. But overall, yeah, I think I'm better than I was. It's like contradictory because they're like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? 5 years ago, I saw myself and, owning like a badass fitness facility, training all these high level, soldiers, police officers, all that shit, making lots of money. People are like, oh, he's the fucking shit. Having like, a brand new car, motorcycle, a bad bitch on my arm, all this cool shit, and none of that ever material. Well, I've had bad bitches, but they weren't the bad I was looking for. They're crazy. But overall, I'm alive. I'm healthy, So I guess, yeah, I'm better than I was.
I definitely think things are better for me than they were 5 years ago. I'm not 17 anymore, which is good because being a teenager was hard and it sucked and I would not go back. I definitely am like way less self-destructive. I haven't like self-harmed or anything like 2 years, I think.
Oh,
Not
that's
even, but
good.
like almost. And I don't do drugs anymore, so that's good. Really, everything that I have now is like everything that I wished for when I was younger. Like, I just have
Nice.
like a safe home. I live with like someone that loves me. I have two cats, which like I never had cats before. I always wanted a cat, and now I have two.
That's
So,
awesome.
like, what else could you ask for?
Not a whole lot.
I definitely do agree with you that I thought that I would be farther. I either thought I like wouldn't be here because I was shocked when I turned 20. I was like, wow,
Right?
I'm like still alive. That's crazy. But then I realized I hadn't like done anything, and I think it's just like an Asian thing. But it was
Yeah.
like my mom told me like you have to be totally like financially independent by the time you're 23, which I am. So thanks, mom.
Nice.
But I thought I would have done more. Like I have a lot of ideas and I work really hard. So I was like, oh, even if I don't plan for a future, then I'll be fine. And like that's not the case. That's not
Right.
how that works. Yeah, I'm not anywhere close to where I thought I would be. Like if you asked 17-year-old me where I'd be in 5 years, this is not it, but
Right.
it's fine.
Maybe not to be to ultimately where you want to be, but are there any steps that you want to take or could take in the next year to maybe not necessarily get you to where you want to be, but to get you to a place where you're more proud of yourself than you are now? Not saying that you're not proud of yourself, but just like even if it's one more rung up the ladder to just say you're progressing in any way.
Logically speaking, I know like it's not like I'm not making progress. Like logically speaking, I know I work hard, and logically speaking, I know that I'm like making progress, but like emotionally, it doesn't feel like that, if that makes sense. I
Yeah.
think it's just mental. Like, it's all like, especially because all of my self worth is tied to my productivity.
Yeah.
So it's like if I don't do anything, they're like, oh well, like I suck. That's it.
Yeah,
Like
me too.
that's all I have. So I think the problem isn't like getting somewhere, but it's like feeling different.
Yeah, feeling like you're getting somewhere, because you can be actually getting somewhere, but if you don't feel like it doesn't really matter if you are in a really good position or not. Because I know at work, it's a fucking struggle because it feels like all my friends are progressing and I'm like a piece of shit.
Yeah, no.
And obviously, I won't say any other names because I don't want them getting freaked out. But since I started at work, it seems like a lot of my friends have moved up. One of them, you know personally, because that's how you became my coworker. But like we were super tight, and then I was like, we're always laughing, joking, having fun, and I was like, we're the same. But then all of a sudden, bam! It's like now he's a badass. He's like on top, and I'm like, I'm still down here being a loser, and I'm like, shit, he's a boss now, and I'm still dumping trash, cleaning restrooms, and then like and it just became like a trend. All my friends around me were moving up. They're all getting promoted into management spots, and I'm still down here, a little fucking loser. And I was like, and I'd ask people, I was like, well, what's wrong with me? I work just as hard as all them, if not harder. And some people are like, well, it's fucked up to say you work harder. Well, a lot of them, I do work harder than them because my specific job requires me to do more than them. I'm out there in the snow and the rain pushing carts. They're doing stuff, punching, check stand buttons or doing whatever else they're doing. I said, so technically I do work harder than them. But it kind of makes you feel bad about yourself because you're like, well, what's so good about them than me? Why am I not moving up? Why am I not improving? And I think sometimes all it comes down to is they had more balls than you. They took a shot.
Right.
You are scared. You want to be where they are, but you don't want to take a shot because fear of failure. It's like they could have failed too, but they went in the interview to interview and they made it. Maybe because there was no one else that applied, so they didn't had no competition. Or maybe there was competition, But because they worked hard, everyone saw something in them and was like, we're going to give them a fucking shot. They're like, they'd probably give you the same shot because you prove yourself every day. You work hard as fuck. But a lot of people, they have everything they need to move ahead in life and to succeed. But like you mentioned earlier, frozen. You're just, fear is petrifying. You're afraid to go forward. You're afraid to go back. You're just stuck. And everyone's like, hey man, come on. Come in here. The water's fine. Come on. You're like, no. You know, and you're just like, what the fuck? And you're like, and then 20 years from now, you're still in that same spot. And you're like, dude, I wish I would have done that. And I was like, what's the worst that can happen? They can tell you no. And no doesn't always mean definite. It can mean no for right now. It was no because maybe there's no openings. You're good enough. We just can't give you a spot that's not there. We can't create another spot for you. But if someone leaves or someone gets fired and you apply, there's about 50 people that will put their name behind you and you're probably going to get it. But a lot of times you don't think that way.
That is understandable. It's like you don't want to move forward because at least like being uncomfortable is better than like not knowing.
Yeah, because you're like, I'm good at what I do now and they love me, but if I go higher, maybe my schedule will change and my schedule will make life uncomfortable because maybe now I'll have to do all openings or all closings, but you're making more money. But I won't have a life because my schedule changes. But you're making more money.
Do you have hope for the future?
Yes, I do have hope for the future because I learned that I do have a lot of skills that I didn't realize I had. A lot of people open my eyes and pretty much daily tell me I'm better than what I believe I am. So that makes my future better.
What do you think that future will look like?
As long as I push myself this year, I think that I'll definitely be on track to get to where I want to be, or at least get on the road to where I want to be.
Right.
So obviously in the next 5 years, I want to try to own my own company of some kind. I don't know exactly what yet because I have tons of ideas. My main idea is probably not going to happen, at least not for a while. But I think if I can start a business, even if it's something that has nothing to do with what I truly want to do, and start small, just that small victory will let me know I can do it. So within the next year or two, I want to have, even if it's like a t-shirt business, because nowadays there's so many businesses you can start with basically no money, no real resources, but start something just to prove to myself, hey, I can do it, feel what it feels like to be a business owner. And I think from there, once I get exposure, because that's important, I think then I'll start to grow.
I do have hope for the future. Like, God, I hope so, because I'm 22. It would be really sad if I didn't. I don't know what I'll be doing in 5 years from now. Hopefully I'll be married.
Well, that will be awesome.
I definitely think that maybe I'll be, like, in the field that I want to be career-wise. Like, doing creative things as a living. Maybe I'll own property even. That's, like, a stretch, because we live in the 2020s now, and property, like, owning property is a luxury for rich people.
Yes.
But maybe someday, maybe in 5 years, and I definitely think that I'm still gonna have cats and probably a fish in 5 years. So those are my plans.
Any two-legged kids?
Oh no, God.
It's just like, no.
I don't want kids. I've never wanted kids. I went into teaching because I like to give them back. I don't know what will happen next. I don't know what the future holds. If I'll be married or if I'll have cats. I don't know if I'll always be safe or happy or in recovery, because life isn't like that. I don't even know if I'll be alive 5 years from now, but what I do know is that I have hope. I have hope because the me of today is still better than the me of 5 years ago, or a year ago, or yesterday. And everything that I've gone through hurts still. It does. I won't lie. But I can now live my life as an almost functioning adult, contributing my stories and my bad jokes to society. And I have bad days sometimes. Sometimes life is just hard. But my bad days have become less and less each year. Working on healing is hard, and the amount of times I've cried in frustration because I have to work 10 times as hard as neurotypical people just to feel okay, just to function normally, is too many times to count. But at least I'm okay. And now, at least I know I'm not alone anymore. Someone out there gets it. Someone out there understands. And they are alive, and they're 39, and learning that I'm not the only one makes the world feel a little less lonely for me. If you're someone that resonates with this message, I believe in you, and you're not alone. Maybe you will have to work 20 times harder than I did to be okay someday, but you will be okay. Thank you for listening to this episode. It really means a lot to me. If you want to follow this podcast, see what we're up to, maybe even be on the show, make sure to follow us on Instagram, Twitter, and even Facebook at The Human Pods. So it's just like the little @ thing with the words The Human Pods. And as always, if you want to ruin your feed and follow me, you can find me at Ephemerality with an I instead of a Y at the end. That's EPHEME. Nope. That's EPHEMERALITI. Thanks to Matt for being on this episode. I'll be back next week for sure with a super cool series, so make sure to tune into that. Anyways, have a good day, guys. It's been real.
I do apologize for being a pussy and crying, but because that's very rare that anyone ever sees me do that.
Yeah.
But it's
hard to talk about stuff like that.
It is. Thanks for having me. I appreciate your kindness and your friendship. It means a lot.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm gonna edit it and not sleep for like 24 hours straight, but it'll be fine. Like, right. Hi. Oh. Come here. I know. Come here. Want to be on the podcast?